Welcome to your midweek Cybersecurity Executive Briefing, brought to you by Clock Tower Technology Services and the United Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm Brian Sulo, your virtual CISO for the next 15 minutes. My company is Clock Tower Technology Services, and we provide IT, telecom, and information security services to businesses with 10 to 100 employees. But this isn't a sales pitch, so if you want to learn more about what we do and how we do it, give me a call, send me an email, or catch me on LinkedIn. Today is Wednesday, December 15th, and it's time for cybersecurity news and takeaways that you can use in your business today. I'll keep the InfoSec jargon to a minimum, but if there's anything you don't understand, please ask me to clarify at the end of the presentation if you're attending live, or in the comments section if you're watching the recording. Now let's get to this week's news, and what a week it's shaping up to be. Google fixed the 17th zero-day. Whoops, sorry about that. From securityaffairs.co, Google has fixed the 17th and hopefully last zero-day vulnerability in Chrome for 2021. A zero-day vulnerability refers to a flaw that the bad guys knew about before the good guys, leaving the manufacturer 0 days to create a fix before it becomes a problem. If you're using Google Chrome as your web browser, make sure it's updated to 96.0.4664.110 or greater. Essentially, update it to the latest version and you should be all set. Also from Security Affairs, MooBot, the botnet with the Farside-esque name, is anything but comical. MooBot is a collection of compromised Hikvision cameras and network video recorders, or NVRs, and it's getting bigger. The Chinese-owned Hikvision is one of the most successful brands of surveillance cameras sold in the US, so there are a lot of them out there. The vulnerability used by MooBot to take over these devices only requires access to the web interface of the device. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. If you're running a camera system in your organization, make sure to do two things. Segregate all the cameras and NVR equipment onto its own VLAN that cannot access your other systems. And don't allow remote administration of the camera equipment without a VPN connection. Your IT support team should be able to tell you if you've got this configured, and if not, should be able to configure it for you. And it's time to update those iPhones and iPads and iWatches and MacBooks and all your other Apple devices. The Hacker News reports that Apple has recently patched a remotely exploitable vulnerability that can allow an attacker to run arbitrary code on pretty much all their products. So make sure your devices are up to date. And finally, the big one, what many are calling the worst vulnerability of the decade. The cryptically named Log4Shell. This vulnerability has received the highest possible severity rating, 10 out of 10, in the NIST vulnerability database. Attacks taking advantage of this vulnerability began 2 weeks ago, making this a 0 day of epic proportions. But what is it and who is at risk? That's where things get a little technical. Log4j, sometimes pronounced literally as it's spelled, log numeral 4j, log4j, is a component of the free Apache web server. The job of Log4j is to provide a simple way for a web application to log various events and trigger actions based on those events. We've talked about Apache in this briefing before as a software package that might be running on a server that provides a public web interface. That's one common use. But Apache is also embedded in thousands of other products. Almost any system that has a web interface, which is almost every system nowadays, could utilize Apache to provide that interface. The scope of the problem is massive, and it's made even more complicated by the nature of the vulnerability. There is no direct external interface to Log4j, it just runs in the background of a web server, collecting events and processing them. The problem occurs when an event contains a specially crafted string of characters. Log4j interprets these characters as a command to connect to an external system and download code that allows it to provide additional information about the event, among other things. This is where the explanation gets into the weeds somewhat, but suffice it to say that a malicious actor can direct Log4j to connect to a malicious server and to download and execute malicious code on the system where Log4j resides. This code could result in anything you could imagine, including a complete takeover of the system. What makes this vulnerability especially worrisome is that there is no one attack vector that can be blocked. It's completely dependent on how Log4j is configured in the affected system. And in systems where Apache is embedded into an appliance, there may be no way to inspect this. As an interesting example of the unpredictable nature of this vulnerability, a researcher changed the name of his iPhone to a specially crafted string that triggered this exploit and was able to execute code on the Wi-Fi controller, a system his iPhone had no access to. More trivial examples include typing the malicious string directly into the username field of a login page or adding it to the connection string of a web browser connection. The technical steps to mitigate this vulnerability are beyond the scope of this briefing, but there are a few things your IT team needs to do right away. First, inventory any Windows, Mac, or Linux systems that are running Apache and determine if an affected version of Log4j is installed. Second, apply the necessary patches or mitigations to these systems. Third, inventory all other systems, routers, switches, access points, Wi-Fi controllers, and other appliances or embedded systems, and search for statements from the manufacturers that either provide an update or confirm that Log4j is not running on the system. Number 4, update all affected systems for which an update is available. And number 5, finally, if a system is affected but no update is available, or if your team cannot determine whether or not a system is affected, block that system's access to the internet. And I'm not talking about inbound access only. I mean put a rule in the firewall that blocks that device from connecting to any external address. However, even that does not ensure the system is not vulnerable, since logged events can come from other systems on the internal network. And, as an aside, systems like this should already be segregated onto separate VLANs to contain the effects of these kinds of flaws. And that's your cybersecurity executive briefing for this week. Before we get into the Q&A section, I just want to mention that the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Remember that the stories presented are selected to be relevant to our audience based on the technologies you've said you're using. If you're using other technologies in your organization and you'd like those covered, please let me know. If you're watching this after the fact and you want to be part of the next live session, visit clocktowertech.com/cxb.html and register for the next call. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment letting us know what you learned or what could have been more clear. Until next time, stay safe, stay in touch. Together, we are secure.